Welcome to the Grandpa Channel. I'm Steve Harris, but my grandkids call me Rivers. Here we ask a simple question. What did life teach you the hard way? Because a lifetime reveals things you can't learn any other way. On this show, we sit down with people who've lived a little, stumbled a little, and learned a few things along the way. So pull up a chair, because what a lifetime reveals can steady another. Welcome to the Grandpa Channel. I'm Steve Harris. Today we have a very interesting guest, Glen Nelson. What did life teach you, Glen Nelson, the hard way?
I was a really sick kid because I was allergic to everything. Like trees, grass, animals, all the food on the plate. I grew up on a farm, so we were sheep herders in a town so small that it didn't have a name. My mom was an opera singer. My dad played in the trombone. We had original art all over the house. I remember being so sick and exhausted that I couldn't get off a couch for days at a time. That's how sick I was. And so for me, the hard thing in life was this thing. It was like, if you have a chronic illness, people understand what constant pain means, but they think of allergies as like this annoyance, a seasonal annoyance. But for me, it was much more debilitating. So I've joked around over the years that I came to New York to get healthy, but that's exactly what happened. So I came here to go to graduate school at New York University, and I loved it so much I just stayed. Well, that was just kind of the environment that I grew up in. The lesson though, Rivers, I didn't have to live where I was born. I could choose what would be a really great place for me. You have a lot more control than you think you do on the environment where you choose to live.
That's a great lesson. Are there any other lessons that you've learned the hard way in life, Glenn?
For me, when my daughter was 4 years old, she had a series of brain tumors and operations that were really quite frightening. And as I came out of the other end of it, she's fine now and very happy. What I realized was that I was going after the wrong things in almost every part of my life. I had this goal of what I wanted to do and be and achieve. And a lot of it I ended up saying after that experience, does that really matter? Mm-hmm. Do I really want to spend X percentage of my life doing that thing? And so I pivoted quite a bit. I pivoted in my volunteer work. I can still care about all those things without giving everything to it. It's not all or nothing. And then over time, that's played out to be a more sustainable model for me.
Oh, that's great. I think there's the old saying that says, we make plans and God laughs.
That's completely true. I'm a little bit younger than you. I turned 65 last month.
But you're a youngster. Yeah.
A whippersnapper. Yeah. But that number doesn't something to you. You say, oh, wow, am I supposed to be playing golf and sitting on my porch now, and so you do a little bit of recalibration. One of the things that I love about your podcast, Rivers, is just the general concept of it. Like, do grand folks have something of value to share? Mm-hmm. And I was reading an article this week in my local newspaper, and it said that there are two segments of the population that feel the most invisible, and those are people our age and older, and people in their 20s. So those two segments of the population feel invisible. And so there is this group that is doing a study right now in Boston and Reno. And there's a public phone, like an old payphone. And if you pick up the phone call, which is free, it automatically connects you to the other side. So it's close to a university in Boston, and it's in an assisted living facility in Reno. And what they're finding is that these people in our age and people in their 20s have quite a lot of interesting things to talk about. And they're helping each other. And they're finding that both of these groups are longing to connect. And they need somebody else to be a little bit of a bridge to help that happen. Isn't that fascinating?
Fascinating. I think that can't we, as a 65-year-old and a 70-year-old, can't we serve as that bridge? That's one of the things that is really driving what I'm trying to do with this Grandpa Channel. Is I just think we could do a better job of being a bridge. How do you see yourself as a bridge of sorts?
Well, it's evolving, but recently has been really, really fascinating. I'm not the kind of person who wants to just, to pass on my great wisdom because I don't have that high of an opinion of myself. But I am noticing at my age, I am much more approachable to younger people than I was even 10 years ago. I was at a bus stop last week, and I like clothes. My mom was a tailor and she was a weaver, taught the university level. And I've always liked interesting fashion. I followed that world. And I was wearing a jacket from India. It was kind of colorful. And these at the bus stop, these two pretty hipster looking 20-year-olds came up to me and they said, "Hey, cool jacket." And I said, "Actually, you're wearing something that's pretty cool too." Anyway, an hour later, we're still talking. They just finished this incredible trip to Africa, and they took this iron railroad from North Africa all the way down to near Angola. Everything I said was interesting to them, and everything they said was interesting to me. And it wasn't so much about imparting wisdom, but occasionally they would say something like wanting approval or wanting insight. Like they would say, "Well, I'm going to a community college right now," they said kind of sheepishly. And I'm like, "Hey, I'm all for that." I have friends who did that exact thing and they really loved it. I'm just more curious now than I've ever been,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't feel that I'm judgmental
Mm-hmm.
about anything because I've made more mistakes than anybody that I'm talking to has made. And so I just want to talk with them and find out about themselves.
The older that I get, when I have these experiences like you just described, I mean, it's like frosting on top of a beautiful piece of cake. Or would you have envisioned having that conversation with them when you woke up that morning?
No, no. I often feel like I'm at the exact right place at the exact right time to meet people. It's kind of weird, and I don't want to get too cosmic spiritual about it, but that kind of thing happens all the time with me, all the time. People I know, people I haven't seen in a long, long time, and I just bump into, or I'm thinking about them, and suddenly I realize there's a reason I'm thinking about them, or strangers who become friends. I mean, I don't know. There's something out there that's pushing people together. A few
Hey,
years ago, I was at an old record store, and they had a video wall, and on the screen was a 1930s symphony broadcast of Arturo Toscanini and the NBC Radio Orchestra. And it was grainy old thing, and I thought it was kind of fun. So I was listening. And this super, super old guy came up to me, and he wanted to watch too. So he's like, elbow to elbow with me. And all of a sudden, he's looking really closely and like really intent. And all of a sudden he goes, "There I am." And he's a cellist in Toscanini's orchestra in the
when you started hitting,
1930s. Completely cool, right? And so I
wow.
had this great long chat with him. But my takeaway from that was if I were on the street, I would walk right by that guy. There
Yeah.
is no way I would ask him about his life. And so there are these barriers that are keeping us from connecting with each other. And some of it is just we're just too busy. We make tons of judgments that so and so is not going to be worth our time, or they're not going to like us, or whatever. And so I have a few hacks with that.
Okay, tell me about them.
One of my hacks is this is a New York thing, but I suspect it's somewhat universal. I can put on my tough New Yorker face. I haven't looked at the mirror making the face, but it's tough. It says,
It's tough.
"Don't mess
It's
with
tough.
me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm unapproachable. I have
Don't
a
even.
place to go."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone has that. But it's funny how if you get rid of it and just soften it just a little bit, you don't need to be like that creepy person who's walking around with a smile all the time because in New York that reads it a different way. But
Yeah.
you telegraph to people what you want from them. And so just I'm not really good about ice breaking, but if somebody says something to me, I'm pretty good about a follow up. I was at the City Ballet recently, and there was this couple next to us who were a little bit older, meaning my age. I would usually not talk to them at all, and they lean over and start chatting with me, and it turns out that one of the dancers at City Ballet is their son, and
No
they're
way.
super super and they're like they're just from the sticks, right? Like I am, and they were just the cutest couple, and they just couldn't stop talking. And then whenever in the performance that this boy did anything at all, if he just didn't tip over on stage, they were cheering. And it just made my experience that night so much happier. I just loved it.
How come we don't do that more often? Drop the facade.
I would say that does not come to me naturally. In the last 5 years, I've made a conscious decision to do that. Like, in my various communities that I'm a part of, I noticed that people my age were suddenly becoming less visible. And I said to myself, this is my future. So if I don't want that, I have to make a change. I can't expect everybody that I'm around to suddenly wake up one day and say, oh, you're sort of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
so
guess
little things. I stay very far away from anything that could be interpreted as judgment. So, like how someone looks. If I say cool shoes, that's not like, do I look good in these shoes? And if I'm getting food and somebody else is getting food, I'll say, oh, is that a good flavor? I'm thinking of what kind of ice cream I should get.
well, have you found that you've been involved in a bunch of really cool adventures because you've been kind of a little more curious and, kind of using the gifts that God has given you to do that?
Everything is about relationships. These days, you get a job because you know somebody. I'm sorry. You can have a really, really great resume, but it still boils down to who you know. And opportunities are all often like that. And relationships are just so rich with what they teach us. I haven't spent as much time thinking about how I can nurture relationships. What I've done as a default is I'm a really good friend. If you're my friend and you've ever asked me for a favor, that's how most people become my friends, is they ask me for a favor. I'm your friend forever. But I realized that didn't work very well in a place where like I live in New York and people move away and they leave me. And so that pool of friends gets diluted really fast. So I constantly have to think of ways that I can, be more out there. And it's not the easiest. But one thing that I do is I really like cooking. It's fun for me. I'm really a pretty good cook. I take classes. I care about it. And I cook something kind of extravagant every week now. And I have people over. And the thing I love about it is not look at me, how fantastic I am. But throughout the week when I'm figuring out what it is and watching YouTube videos, like how do you make those dumplings? I'm thinking about the person who's coming over.
Do you have any other hacks that you're done with New York flavor and zest with people?
One of them is to get off the phone. Because if I'm on a phone, no one is going to interrupt me. If I'm reading a book or a magazine, they'll often say, "What you reading?" Or, "Oh, is that good? Is that good?"
Oh, that's right.
I'll say, "Oh yeah," and I'll say, "It's the most amazing book about wild chocolate all over the world and how people are going into the Amazon and finding these plants that they thought were extinct." That's how you do it. I don't want to make eye contact with a lot of people. That can be creepy. But if they give me an opening, often they'll say to me, "Cool shirt,"
Yeah.
or, "Oh, those are interesting pants." And what I'm finding is that people today are really much more fashion aware than they were a few years ago. Not to stereotype, but big, tough looking, football playing like folks will say "cool pants" as they walk by. And it's to a point that when I'm wearing certain things, my wife will say, as someone is approaching us who's like a 6'5" linebacker guy, "Watch this." She'll say something.
Yeah.
I don't need to blend in with how everybody else looks. Like a white shirt, for example, never going to happen.
Let me ask you this question. So you've led this really, really, really interesting life, but are there certain things that you do where you feel the most alive, Glenn?
It's the variety, I would say. So not a single thing. If I list them, you're going to say each one of those is boring. Like, for example, growing up on the farm, I've always cared about animals and living things and plants. And I go to the orchid show at the Bronx Botanic Gardens. The first Friday of every month, I get this flower delivery from this crazy florist in Brooklyn. It looks like if Dr. Seuss had a flower shop. That's what it would be.
Yeah.
And then all the food stuff, all the theater stuff. I'm probably the theater maybe 3 times a week and so I feel most alive when I'm expanding what I know and having new experiences, whatever that is. So I'm an adventurer, but I'm an armchair adventurer. You can probably list on one hand the places that I've been to outside of the US. Like I just don't really We don't really vacation. We just stay here or visit family or something.
The most interesting place in the world, arguably, I think, is New York City.
River, here's what we do though. We do staycations all the time. And so we'll do this thing where, okay, my wife, you're in charge of this day and I'm in charge of the next day. And we'll go to one area of town. And the rule is we can't do anything that we've ever done before in that area. And the things that the city offers are things that I can't really find elsewhere. Even when I go on vacation, I find myself being slightly unhappy that I'm there and not home. It's just that everyone has a quirk, and some of my quirks are a distaste of travel. Just some people love that kind of adventure and really thrive on it. I'm not exactly like that. I have to have a little bit of familiarity.
If someone 28 years old listened to our conversation years from now, what would you hope lingers with them?
Wow. This idea of being enthusiastic about something, about being passionate about something, has a ton of power. It really, really does. And so if someone is younger and they just see somebody else excited about something, it's just infectious. And you want to be around those people, and you want to hire those people, and you want to date those people, and you want those people to be your neighbors. And so can everybody walk around all the time like super animated? They probably can. But what you can be is passionate about something. Not about everything.
There's
just about something.
There's an Emerson quote I've loved ever since I was 19 years old, and it goes, "Nothing great was ever accomplished without enthusiasm." And I totally agree with you. And people want to be around people who are enthusiastic about life, and they don't want to be around a Debbie or Dave Downer that's good. Like, it's just a bummer.
It's very easy for any generation to care about the technology and innovation of their generation. Mm-hmm. And that's just historical. I mean, I assume that the Industrial Revolution people were very, very excited about steam, or whatever, or electricity. Look at my new light bulb. Everybody come over.
Or fire.
And yes, I'm almost that old too. But young people today are just the same. They're excited about whatever the technology is. It doesn't replace actual relationships. It just doesn't.
As you look back on your 65 years here on planet Earth, do you sense, and I want you to get cosmic and spiritual, as you mentioned earlier, if you'd like, do you sense the hand of guidance, faith, providence, God in your 65 years?
Well, I'm a religious person. I have found that I haven't got it all figured out, but I'm quite aware that somebody up there, let's say, cares about me as an individual and is steering me to think things and do things and meet people and help people in a very one-on-one kind of way. And I get that feeling all the time. I have impressions all the time, and I follow through with them. And every time that I do, it's like, glad I did that. And even the people who don't ascribe to the same vocabulary that I do connect with the idea that there is something bigger that they can't articulate. A close friend of mine, a couple, had a son, age 27, who died in a tragic motorcycle accident. His funeral was a week ago, and I was asked to be a speaker at the funeral. And I made the decision not to use any vocabulary that felt biblical or preachy or whatever, because I was aware that at least half of the people in that room would not know that or care about that. And these people, this couple whose son had died, had in that span of time since his death to that day, a whole stream of crazy, you'd never believe it kind of experiences. The kind of things that's like, you just shake your head and say, could not happen. Right. But they did happen, and it changed their lives, and it's made all the difference for them.
You always worry after a death of a loved one. Where are they? What are they doing? Why am I alone?
I'll say just generally, because it's really not my stories to tell, is they had visitations from the other side. And they were crystal clear to them. And what I found from conversations was that many people have had experiences that they can't quite pin down. And once that they've embraced that those kind of things happen and maybe give them a name, articulate a little bit about them, then their frequency of recurrence happens more. It's not that they're suddenly more connected or in tune or whatever. It's somehow, I don't know how the system works, but our willingness to accept that kind of thing greases the wheels.
Opens the portal.
It's like maybe it's a momentum play. I don't know. Anyway, so that's kind of where I am in life.
So how it's really
And I said, like, I'm not the kind of person who has dreams, but some of my friends do. And I'm not the kind of person who has this kind of experience or that kind of experience. But here's what I have. Here's the kind of experience that I have. And so I just told a few of these things. It kind of gives people license to go with it, to go with their connection. In my case, believing in God. My feeling is that this power can meet you wherever you are, and whatever your language is. And so that's not a new discovery for me, but it's increasing, in its power to me.
That's it for today's episode of the Grandpa Channel. If something you heard made you laugh, pause, or see life a little differently, pass it along. We're gathering the lessons people learned the hard way, the stories, the second thoughts, and the wisdom that only comes with time. And we'd love to hear yours. What did life teach you the hard way? Until next time, keep the perspective honest and the stories coming. I'm Rivers, and I'm out of here.